I'm Kathleen Henderson from Roots and Boots, and I'm headed to one of my favorite places on the farm, which is my far garden. It's our large in-ground garden. It's late May, and I thought you might like to take a little tour and see what's growing out there. This is the pump that runs water through a hose out to the garden, and we have all kinds of diverters out here that are hooked up to soaker hoses to water each of the different rows. This is the big arch that we built to grow loofah gourds on this year. Those will be going in very soon, like in the next few days. This is our little gate, and here is the far garden. I'll show you what's growing. I made another separate video with a tour of my kitchen garden that is right behind our house. I love to grow a little bit of everything in that garden, but here in the far garden is where I grow the bulk of our crops, like tomatoes and squash and watermelons and onions and carrots, and I'll give you a peek at each of the things that are growing out here in the far garden. So right here is my tunnel that covers my broccoli and cauliflower. The only way that I have successfully grown brassicas safe from caterpillars is under row cover. And it's taken us a little while to perfect our system, but this is working great for us now. We get really high winds here that just come sweeping across, and it's important to have a really sturdy row cover. I've used lighter weight row covers before that just couldn't stand up to all the wind. But the key is to find the balance between sturdy enough to stand up to winds for us in our location, but light enough to allow water and rain to come through. So anyway, this is our solution to that, and I'm so excited to finally grow broccoli and cauliflower. Here next to the tunnel of brassicas is a row of cucumbers, and then up at the top of the garden there is where I have sowed a whole bunch of watermelon seed. And then over here at the end of the broccoli and cauliflower tunnel is a little patch of flowers, cosmos and zinnias. And then over here, these rows are squash, 2 rows of squash, 1, 2, and then 2 rows of tomatoes. One row, I think it's this row, is my paste tomatoes for canning, and then the other row is all the other tomatoes, big heirlooms and cherries. They're all different types in this row. And then here are the carrots. I have succession sowed 4 different successions of carrots, starting them each about 3 weeks apart. This side is the row that I sowed first, and then about 3 weeks later the next row, and then so on and so forth. And my last row is so tiny you might not even be able to see it on camera. Oh, I think you can. This is my last row that I just sowed almost 2 weeks ago. And there you can get a good look at the difference in sizes, although this actually looks a little bigger than this, but if you look up the row you can see that this one on the far side, on the far left, is definitely bigger than this next one. And then the third one, and then the fourth one is obviously still pretty teeny. And then here in this next row are all of my onions, and then at the end I have some zinnias planted. And then here on the perimeter fence is, well actually up at the top is celery, and then parsley as we come down the side, and then peas and more onions. It was my onion overflow. And then sunflowers down here at the bottom. And then over here, we ran the rows perpendicular to the squash and tomato rows at the top of the garden. I actually planted more paste tomatoes because I really rely on those for preserving, canning. I'm not sure how everything's gonna do down on this bottom end of the garden this year. Last year is when we added this big L. We started with a rectangle for this far garden when we first moved here 3 years ago, and then last year, like I said, we added on this big L, and so this is part of the L that we added last year, and it did absolutely terrible. The soil out here is clay and it's compacted. It does not drain very well at all. In fact, you can see over here, the ducks are over on that corner now, outside beyond the far garden, but over here is where they were first. We wanted them to kind of like annihilate all the grass and weeds and fertilize, because we're trying to build the soil. We have plants to plant pumpkins and things like that in that space. And you can just see how the water, see how it doesn't drain? It's terrible. It just turns it into this like swamp. So our plan is to make hugel beds out there, hugel culture beds. I'm kind of wishing that we had taken more of a hugel approach inside the far garden here at the bottom, where I already know that it drains poorly. So we may rethink this one row that is still unplanted. I'm a little concerned, like I said, about this row of tomatoes that's down here at the bottom because of the drainage issues. But over time, I know the soil will improve. We are doing things like I'm getting the animals in here on the off season to fertilize and to aerate the soil. We are adding during the winter, throughout the winter, as we muck out animal bedding like the goats and even the chickens and ducks. We're tossing that in here in the far garden. We're of course adding wood chips every year, and this year we are planting into composted horse manure. We found a great source for composted horse manure. It's free, and I'm really excited about that. So and we've also been using our broad fork every spring and every fall. So at the end of the growing season, we broad fork it, and then in the spring, prior to building the soil and planting, we broad fork it again. And things like that, practices like that over time will definitely build the soil, but it just takes time. We don't expect to see amazing results right away. So this bottom section of the garden is still a little bit of a wild card. So I tried to make sure that I wasn't, putting all my eggs in one basket, putting all of a certain vegetable in one place. So if these paste tomatoes don't do very well, because, for the reasons that I just described, that's why I have this other row in the upper part of the garden of paste tomatoes. So I'm kind of like hedging my bets and being very cautious about what I plant down here. I also learned that sunflowers can help, the roots of sunflower plants can help to break up compacted clay. So what's interesting is that from this free horse manure that we're using, we have all kinds of sunflowers coming up. So what I've been doing is scooping them up and transplanting them to the places where I want them. So a few of them I just moved yesterday. That's why they look so sad. Sunflowers do not like to be relocated. They will look sad for a few days, maybe even a week, but they will rebound, I promise, especially if you give them enough water. And we've had some really great rain lately. So anyway, I planted all of these sunflowers down here, and I might continue if I see more sunflowers popping up, which just keeps happening, which is kind of fun. I might keep adding them down here in this particularly troublesome spot of the garden where I know the soil really needs some help. I also planted a row of them here along this fence. They have all already recovered. They've been there for about a week or so. So I thought you might like to see an up-close look at some of the veggies growing. So I'm gonna flip the camera around and show you a quick peek at all the veggies. So I'm in zone 7A, and it's currently late May, almost June. It's actually really unseasonably cold today, and we've had some really great rain. Some of the crops really love that, like carrots and onions and all of the cool season crops, the peas and the lettuces that I have up in the kitchen garden. But anyway, these are cucumbers. We haven't had freezing temperatures, so my warm crops are still happy. These are all cucumbers, several different kinds. And then, like I said, the watermelon seeds are planted here. I planted them only a few days ago, so they have not germinated yet. I'll come back to the broccoli tunnel in a little bit, but this is my squash. All different kinds of squash planted here. This is yellow squash. And then I have a type of zucchini that I like called Costata Romanesco here, and then red Kabucha squash, spaghetti squash, Tahitian melon squash, one of my absolute favorites. It's related to butternut squash, but it gets a fun, long, kind of curved neck. Let's see, now I'm walking backwards from my tags. This is blue Hubbard squash, and then this should be baby blue Hubbard, and one butternut. I had some old butternut seeds. I wasn't sure if any of them would come up, and I just got one. So I actually moved. I like to relocate things all the time. I know that cucurbits don't like to be moved, but they do okay if they're still pretty small. And like I said, we've had a lot of rain lately, so that's perfect planting and transplanting weather. So anyway, I moved that there so I could fill in the gaps where the other butternut squash seeds did not come up. Let's see, this one is, what is this row? Kabucha Squash. Oh, I think I might have said the wrong name for the other, the red, did I say red curry? That was red curry squash back there. This is Kabucha. This is Acorn Squash. And then I only had two, it looks like, come up of my delicata squash. I haven't grown delicata before, so that will be interesting. And then over here, like I said, this whole row is Amish paste. And then this row over here, I'm growing all sorts of heirloom tomatoes. This is a cherry, black cherry, one of my very favorite cherries. And this is Sunrise Bumblebee. I have more Sunrise Bumblebee growing up in the kitchen garden. Cherokee Purple is a big reddish purple tomato, heirloom tomato that I love. Great taste. Pineapple gets kind of big and it's yellowish. Again, really great taste. This is the one whose full name I never remember. It's Principe Borghese or something like that. And then, where does the next one start? Brandywine is a very popular heirloom. You've probably heard of it. Purple Russian. I think it's a paste tomato. I grew it for the first time last year. And then from the tomatoes, we'll skip over the carrots because we already talked about those. And then these are the onions. Onions with zinnia seedlings down here. This is way too crowded, by the way. Zinnias get huge, so I've been little by little scooping them out, these little baby seedlings, and spreading them throughout the garden. I like to do that with a lot of plants, especially flowers, because I like to get all my vegetables in before I decide where to put the flowers. That's just how I operate. So I don't always know exactly where I want the flowers, but I know it's time to get the seeds started, like I want to get them growing. So sometimes I'll just throw a bunch of seed down in a spot, an empty spot, and then as they grow, when they're still pretty small, I will scoop them out. That gives me time to get more of the veggies in place and figure out, you know, where I'll have the little pockets where I want to position flowers. I love to keep flowers around the garden for pollinators and also just, you know, for beautification. It helps me love being out here when there are beautiful flowers. So I usually like to do sunflowers and zinnias and cosmos. This year I also did calendula. There's calendula at the end of the carrot row there. But back to the onions. I'm growing a couple of kinds of onions. I don't even remember which varieties they are. I'll look at the tags as we go up the row. These are one of the first things that went into the garden. They're a cool season crop. So at the top of the onion row, this is yellow Parma. And I'm not sure where all my tags are. I know I'm also growing Patterson onions and some red, I forget which variety. I think it's Red Wing. Yeah, I think my little tags are covered up by the mulch, the grass mulch. Here's one. Yeah, Patterson is down here. Maybe those are the only two varieties that I have in that row. And then, what is this one? Oh, these are my pea names. Little Marvel peas here. And extra early peas. Some of them, I'm pretty sure got chomped by rogue ducks. The ducks love to chomp on any veggies that they can reach through the fence when they get out of their duck pen. Anyway, I don't remember all of the onion variety names, but here's my parsley. It's looking great. I also have more parsley up in the kitchen garden. There's some little baby dill seedlings starting to come up here. That's a little baby dill. in this little gap between the parsley and the celery. I just wanted to make sure I know the difference between parsley and celery, but it can look pretty similar. And when I have help harvesting, I wanted to make sure that nobody confused the parsley with the celery. So I made sure to plant something else here between them. So this is my celery overflow from the kitchen garden. I have a really healthy, great looking crop of celery going on up in the kitchen garden. And then these are more tomato seedlings. I'm not sure where I'm gonna squeeze those in. If you remember from following me on Instagram, I had some trouble with some of my tomato seedlings not making it, and so I reseeded some of them. And this is that like second round of some of those seedlings. But then when I planted the tomatoes out here, I realized that I might not even have room for those. I figure it's better to have more seedlings than you need, right, than to wind up with not enough. And here is a peek inside the broccoli tunnel. Here are my huge broccoli plants. I just did a second harvest yesterday, and I'm hoping to get at least a third or fourth harvest out of them. And then the cauliflower is at the far end. I'm not super experienced at growing cauliflower, so I'm kind of still trying to figure that one out. I have really big leaves but no heads, so I don't know if it just takes longer for the cauliflower or if I need to do a little bit of breeding. Maybe I didn't plant them early enough, so I'm still learning on the cauliflower. So that's my far garden. I hope to share an update probably midsummer and then maybe later in the summer or heading into the fall. That's my intention, but of course it gets really busy at that time of year in the garden. So definitely drop me a comment below if you have any specific questions or if you're voting for an update later in the summer.